Hello, everyone. Welcome to ITS 372. 372, yeah, 372. All right. So welcome.
Welcome.
So we're going to get started. I'm just letting everyone in right now to the session. So today is the first day of class for 372, the System Administration and Management course. So what I'll do today is I'll go over the course description, the syllabus, and just kind of get into it really as much as possible. And then people are coming in still. And then we'll go from there. If you have any questions, also feel free to ask. All right. So during the first week, I have to do, like a roll call. So let me just really, I'll take a picture of who's in here for 372. And then that way I can update this later in the system. So remember, for the first 2 weeks, you need to attend the sessions so I know, or email me. If you're watching the video, email me and let me know that you're viewing the videos at least, so I can, otherwise I will mark you as not being present. And I don't know that they do something with that information. All right, so I think I got pictures. All right, so now I did the roll call. So now let's go ahead and get started. So I'll do usually the same thing. So this course is always really interesting because I always usually know half the students because they've taken 350, and then there's another half that haven't taken 350, and so I'm seeing them for the first time. So there's always that. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to go to Brightspace, right? So let's do that. Let's share screen. Okay. All right, so on Brightspace, as you know, we use Brightspace now. Let me find. Okay. So ITS 372. So let's start here with the announcement. So welcome to, so you should be seeing Brightspace. Yeah. So welcome to ITS 372. As you know, given the current pandemic situation, we are running the course online via Zoom. The lectures and labs will be held at the designated time via Zoom. Okay, so we will meet Mondays and Wednesdays in the 2 to 4 o'clock slot there. So afternoons, okay, Monday and Wednesdays for our lecture and labs. And they'll be held on Zoom. So I'll usually on Monday and Wednesday, I'll be on here. Sometimes you'll have a lab assignment, you'll be working on it, but you can ask questions at any time. I usually, additionally to Brightspace, I always have my own website where I kind of do things my way. And so I've already set up the course. All right, so now I'm going to share. So I clicked on the link as you saw, and this is the website for 372. Usually I like to put information here that's relevant, and then some of this is also in the syllabus. Okay, so this is just, I like this, it's convenient, I can put links and things. And then I have this calendar, right, of the basic topics. So you can see I've already populated the calendar, and it basically has some videos from the last semester that you can take a look at. And this is the sequence of topics. So as you can see, we're starting today. think I haven't updated the dates. So today is the 11th. Okay, so I will be updating the dates. I guess I missed that. But anyway, next Monday is Martin Luther King Day, so it's off. And then after that, just be aware, spring break, although no one might be traveling, but still, it's going to be from March 6th, well, that week of March 16th. And then presentations in the last week of April, and then finals during finals week, the first week of May. All right, so that's the calendar. As I said, I know the dates are a little, yeah, I definitely haven't changed it, so I will be working on that. All right, so just be aware that all the videos, so whenever I record a lecture, I'm not gonna put the videos on Brightspace or add any links on Brightspace. Instead, I'm going to be using this calendar once I update it to put the links here, right? So that I like it this way because it's more organized for me. I know what I did when, and then so you can reference this yourself. All right, so let me go back to Brightspace. So whenever you're looking for that link, you can just come here, right? So I provided the link there for you to use. Additionally, this course, as I'll get into the course, basically it's called System Administration and Management. But it's really about the concept of system administration, you know, computer systems administration, but in particular, this is your Linux course, okay? So this course is actually designed to learn Linux or Unix, right? Linux and Unix, and to learn how to manage and administer a Linux machine system. So it really relates to an operating system, right? Which is the Linux operating system. However, this is not a course on how to design and build your own operating system. I think you guys take a course called 330 for that. This is about using an operating system, right? So how to manage, you know, so basically the command line. Okay, in Linux, command line is king. And so that's going to be the goal of the class. So making sure you guys have an understanding of how to use Linux, that you're very good at it. Scripting is another big component because whenever you're doing any task in Unix or Linux and system administration, you really want to automate the tasks as much as possible, right? So for instance, if you have 40 students that you need to add into the system, create user accounts and everything, you don't want to do that manually, right? Imagine it's going to take all your day just doing that. Instead, you would want to automate the process. And so that's why automation is a big component of this. And in particular, we'll learn how to, just some ideas on how to automate those processes through scripting, right? So we'll be looking at some of the scripting languages in Linux like Bash, Perl, and in particular, Python. But the focus of the entire course, anything that we do related to scripting, the focus will always be related to system administration, how to do backups, how to create accounts, how to automate pretty much any task that you can imagine in a system administration, even security things, right? So security things or all kinds of things. And as I said, it all revolves, the entire course will be in Linux. It's about Linux. I'll start with what is Unix and all of that, a little bit of the history, and then we'll just go into that. This is a course that has a lot of topics. It's not going into depth of one specific topic, but instead it's a breadth kind of set of topics that we look at. So we look at a lot of things, all the different ideas that we should be aware of. There's a little bit of management also because, managing people in an IT practice or just how to manage your time, things like if you're doing a help desk, do you want to just answer emails all day, or do you actually want to get some work done? You know, those kinds of things. So we'll look at some of those ideas as well. Anyway, here's a link to the Seed Labs VM. Usually, we won't be doing that many Seed Labs in this course, but you know, I provided this because we will be using the Linux Ubuntu virtual machine VM, and so you know, that VM is always convenient to use. I do have another VM in my server. I need to update my website to provide that link. And we might create other VMs as we go along in the semester, but they're all going to be Linux Ubuntu pretty much. Lectures, I will create videos and post them on YouTube. So usually just, you know, YouTube is just more convenient, you know, very efficient. So I'll be recording, I believe, oh, hopefully I'm recording this one. Actually. Let me see.
You're recording it on Zoom.
I am?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, excellent. So somebody's asking me, can we use the VM from last semester? Yeah, you can use it. We're using Linux Ubuntu VMs. So you can, it just depends on the homework, right? There might be a homework where I'll just say, hey guys, you have to use this VM. It's a fresh, just because it might be a fresh, like set to defaults VM, and it just might make the assignment easier actually. Sorry about that. So, but yes, you can use as long as it's a Linux Ubuntu, you should be able to do everything. A lot of the things, you know, system administration is about what? If you work, let's say that you get hired as the Linux guru in your company. What does that entail? It entails installing a lot of programs, configuring them, and getting them to work. You see that? So or being efficient in automation, automating tasks, or knowing just the ins and outs of just how to use Linux, right? You know, also just in the sense of the curriculum here in this program, as some of your fellow students will tell you, a lot of the courses, the upper division courses, use Linux, right? And so this course, sometimes I have students in this course that have never really spent that much time on Linux. Maybe in 135 they saw it a little bit. And so this is really the class that's supposed to get you caught up. So the great thing about it is we assume that you've never used Linux. This is how I start the course, assuming that no one has ever used Linux. And so we'll start from there, okay? A lot of it is practice. So don't get like, you know, it's not about memorization. It's about getting a feel for the Linux operating system. I guarantee you this is a course that will help you a lot over the years. You know, I've seen a lot of our students later on, they become specialized in like the cloud, AWS, all that. And usually, you know, knowing Linux and Windows, you know, both very well is very useful. So anyway, the focus of this course is entirely on Linux and also the framework of system administration and management. All right, so I'll be posting the videos on YouTube. And then I will link them on the calendar, as I said. I usually just like to do that. It gives me a really clear picture of where everything is. We will use VMs to complete the labs. So usually you'll use just one VM for a lab, although there's a few labs where you'll need 2 or even 3 VMs, at least 2. So just be aware of that. And then assignments, they will be linked on Brightspace. So for anything to do with homework has to be done through Brightspace. So please don't send me homework assignments via email, right? As you know, that the policy is that you have to submit everything through Brightspace. What I do recommend, if you feel you need more time to complete an assignment, speak that day when we meet in class, and I'd rather we give an extension, but just don't email me. All right, so I'm having another question here. Can we use Ubuntu 20.04 instead of 16.04? And the support date is April of this year. So currently, for some of the seed labs, I think the 16.04 VM hasn't been updated yet. For if you want to use 20.04 is fine, or 18.04, whatever you want to use is perfectly fine. Be aware of one thing though. One recommendation I usually make, and this will make a lot of sense, like when you're doing your project at the end of the semester, is to configure a Hadoop cluster, which is 3 Linux machines. And you have to do it on your own. When you take I know you want to say, for instance, oh, I want to take the latest because the latest has to have all the latest things, right? But the problem with the latest sometimes, and that again is a concept in system administration, is that there's going to be, yes, it's starting, it's the newest one, but there's also less available information on the web for that particular version. So usually what you want to do is you want to get like the one in the middle, the one that, as you said, has the support date for it is not, still has 2-3 years to go, but at the same time, a lot of the bugs and problems have been worked out. And there's a lot of information on how to do something. If you take the more recent version, the problem that you're going to have is that when you want to configure something, it's going to be harder to find information about it, and then you're going to be struggling more to get something to happen. It would seem that, you might want to say that, oh yeah, well, it's the latest, it's not going to have any problems. But unfortunately, there's always issues, things that change. And so my recommendation to you guys would be, pick something like in the middle, right? So something that still has a few years to go and that has been around for a while, so that there's plenty of information for configuration. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. So now let's go ahead and let's continue here. So where was I? Oh yeah, submitting your assignments. You want to submit your assignments via Brightspace. Office hours, you can email me and I'll try to set up a designated period in the week when we can meet. If sometimes my office hours don't work out for you, so you can just email me about it. Otherwise, my office hours are Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Okay, so I'll usually just email me and I'll get on Zoom, and it'll be through Zoom. Exams will be done online or will be take-home exams. The meeting place is Zoom. This course, the lectures and labs are going to be Mondays and Wednesdays in the time slot between 2 and 4 p.m. And then here's the information on the link, Zoom link, meeting ID, meeting password. The teaching assistant for this course is Mr. Mitch Burke. His email is there, you can see it. So he will be the teaching assistant for the course. He will help with homework questions, emails, so always copy him when you send me an email, and software setup. So he'll help us with getting VMs going and all of that. All right. The only program that you need for this course, I would say, unless you have an actual physical Linux machine, is you'll need to have VMware, right? So you'll need to download VMware, and then once you have done that, you can run your virtual machines. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to move to content, basically. So I Should be sharing content. All right, so in Brightspace, I will have all the materials for this course are going to be here. All right, as you can see, I think I already created, yeah. So these are all the modules for the course this semester. Under admin, I usually put things like, basically what I had in the announcement is here in this link info. And then this is the syllabus, which we will look at in a second. Then I have a link for resources, and these are just materials that you will need, like that PPA e-captures. So these are some reading assignments that you'll have to do. Creating a VM with VMware. I think I also have a video on the YouTube channel about that, so you can take a look at that. All right, so excuse me. So the topics, basically this week, the intro, we'll go over that. What do system administrators do? Your first homework assignment, which, as you might imagine, just has to do with Linux, right? So it'll be a Linux exploration lab. You'll go, I've provided some commands, and you just have to run them, right? And then answer some questions. All right, then after that, we'll get into scripting a little bit. I'll give a brief introduction to Python. If you're one of those people that gets nervous when you're seeing a programming language for the first time, last semester I taught a course in Python here. And so if, I'm not saying you have to do this, but I'm just saying if you want to, you can. I'm currently sharing the website, so you can look up in the courses that I have on here. Somewhere in here, yeah, I have the Intro to Python. You can click on that, and I have the calendar here with all the videos and all the topics. So you can check out any one of these topics or videos if you have, if you want to learn more about a specific topic. Otherwise, there's plenty of information on YouTube as well. All right, so let's go. Okay, so as I said, we'll do an introduction to Linux and system administration and scripting. Then services, that's basically one of the important things about a Linux operating system, right? Is that you're gonna have all these services. So you're gonna bring up services and, Apache web server, DNS, and so on. So we'll explore a lot of those this semester. Then we'll talk about grep and awk, give an introduction to what that is, task scheduling and cron, which is a very, very great thing about Linux. So operating systems allow you to schedule tasks, and this has to do with automation. So we'll take a look at that. DNS, which is a service, account management, which is part of creating, allowing people to use your operating system is creating accounts. We'll talk about cluster computing and Hadoop services. This ties into, there's 2 projects in this course, and then this ties into one of them, which is the Hadoop project, which you'll understand. Basically, the Hadoop project is that you'll have to perform a very difficult configuration in Linux. And I like this one because it forces you to use a lot of the things that you learn in the previous topics. So you'll do that. Then we'll do some scripting of various tasks and cases. We'll do a file system analysis in Linux, talk about the file system, obviously, which is critical in Linux, the directory tree. Then we'll talk about historically what SNMP was and SNMP type services, which is it's a protocol for simple network management. So we'll take a look at how that works. It's very, very interesting. And then we'll talk a little bit about security with host-based firewalls and so on. And between this, I'll cover other topics. These are just broad ideas, but we'll cover a few things here and there as well. So this course is very technical in the sense that we use Linux pretty much every week. You will have a lab assignment pretty much every week. And the goal is just for you to practice, all right? So that's really what it is, to practice the concepts. And you're gonna do, since you're doing Linux problems every week, by the end of the semester, you should feel comfortable with Linux. You're not gonna be the world's expert on Linux, but you will be comfortable enough that anything in Linux, no task will ever be a challenge to you anymore. I mean, you know, it'll be challenging, but it'll just be, you know, you'll be used to using it quite a bit. All right, so that's the general idea of the topics. Okay, so now let's take a quick look at the syllabus so that you guys are aware of all the details. All right, so the course is called System Administration and Management, as I said, ITS 37200. This is, of course, spring 2021. I'm Professor Calix. My office is in Anderson 241, although we're using Zoom currently. Yeah, so this, we just switched to Brightspace, so I need to update that. There's my email. And then there's my extension. Office hours, as I said, are Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 4 p.m. The prerequisites for this course are the ITS 135 operating systems, which is your Windows Server course. I believe there that you covered a little bit of Linux, but it doesn't matter. I'll just start from assuming, you know, you've never used Linux really. For those of you that have used Linux, don't worry though. You know, the lab assignments will be very challenging, so they'll keep you entertained. Another prereq for this course is ITS 270, which is just, it means that you've taken some of the networking concepts. This is not a networking class, however, there are some of the concepts of networking that obviously you use with Linux, some of the Linux tools, you know, DNS and so on. All right, as I said, some of the labs will require sometimes the use of 2 VMs. Just be prepared for that. Sometimes what you can do is you can use your physical machine. If you set up the NAT network in VMware, you can use your physical Windows machine, let's say, as one computer, you know, kind of a client type of situation, and then use the Linux machine, the VM, as the server. You know, let's say when you're using SSH services or things of that nature. But there might be some situations where you legitimately need 2 VMs. So you'll have to clone one VM from another one. So just be aware of that. I think in the beginning, we start with just 1 VM, but I think once we get to the DNS lab, we definitely need to have at least 2. But they're fun labs. I mean, they're very interesting, certainly very interesting concepts. And as I said, it will just get you not just exposed to these ideas, but you're always using the, you know, Linux commands. The textbook, so you don't have to buy any of these textbooks, to be honest, right? I have taken it took me a lot of time to get a lot of this stuff in the slides, but so a lot of this is just already in the slides. You don't have to buy the book, although if you want, get the books if you'd like. If you're one of those people that likes to read before class, definitely go ahead and do so. There are 3 books that I would recommend, and just get the latest edition. This one, The Practice of System and Network Administration. I think there's one called Cloud System Administration also by the same authors. But you can get this one, The Practice of System and Network Administration. Just get the latest edition. I usually follow that book for the non-technical things. So that book has very little technical things. It's more like a managerial book, really, about system administration. But it's got some interesting things. So I certainly use the slides in the course. And then the other 2 books are actually very technical books. This is a great book, actually, that if you work in sysadmin of Linux, I would certainly recommend having that in your library. Essential System Administration Tools and Techniques for Linux and Unix Administration, right, by Frisch. So this is definitely a great book, and a lot of my notes come from that book. Okay, so I've already created all the notes and everything, some handwritten, some typed, but they're all already posted on Brightspace. I sometimes have used also as a reference Python for Unix and Linux system administration, the latest edition. And so that one also could be useful to you. But as I said, I'm not asking you to purchase any of these. They're only suggested, not required. Okay. Course description. This course covers topics on computer system administration with a focus on Unix. Topics include, system performance analysis, which is basically like monitoring, right? Monitoring how things are going, benchmarking, monitoring services, testing and debugging. Debugging is, you can think of it as installing and troubleshooting. Configuration of Unix services, security strategies. We'll talk a little bit about that. This is really not a security class, but at the same time, whenever you're dealing with administration of a Linux operating system, security is part of it. The file system, which is critical. Everything is a file in Linux, and so the organization of those files is critical. So file system analysis, that covers a little bit of forensics, although from an administrator point of view. Automation and auditing, so like logging and automation with scripting, so that's pretty critical. Server roles, that just means the services. So you can have a web server or a DNS server or an email server and so on. And special topics. So there's extensive laboratory exercises throughout the semester. As I said, this course has a lot of labs, pretty much a lab every week. Make sure you do those labs. The most important recommendation I can give you this semester is the following: do your labs. If you don't do your labs, I don't accept late labs. Don't expect that 4 weeks before the end of the semester you can send me all the labs of the semester. I mean, I wouldn't even have time, even if I wanted to. So you got to do your labs, and that's the best way to get an A, and also the best way to get a bad grade if you don't do them. Okay, that's pretty common sense. So the topics, the course objectives, we'll cover. Describe the need for managing IT resources through the function of the system administrator. As you know, that's a very big description, right? You can, anything from troubleshooting and help desk all the way to very specialized Linux or Cisco network technician, etc. Computer system administration with a focus on Unix. System performance analysis, benchmarking and monitoring. In particular, we'll look at historical protocols like SNMP and the ideas captured by that type of approach. Testing, troubleshooting, configuration of Unix services, security, automation with scripting and logs, server roles, the need for the policies governing IT systems. As you know, there's always a policy involved in system administration. The Unix file system and file system analysis, server administration and management, users and group management, backup management, disaster recovery, automation management, which is automatic job scheduling, in particular the cron facility in Unix. Training and user support and education, the help desk, right? System support and help desk, and documentation. So we'll talk a little bit about that, some of those ideas, like having a, simple things like having a ticketing system, etc. considering administrative issues related to IT support management. You know, this course requires us to talk a little bit about ethics and, you know, personnel issues. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, organizational culture, etc. All right, so now grading. As you can see here, the grading is divided into exams. There's 3 exams. Each one is worth 10% of your grade for a total of 30%. There's going to be quizzes, teamwork and participation. That's 10% of your grade. That's usually at my discretion. You know, you're participating in class, you know, working well with your team, you know, working well in the classroom, you know, that kind of thing. Term project, there's 2 projects, A and B. Each one is worth 5% of your grade. So as you can see, it's not much in projects. Project A is, as I said, the Hadoop project, which is basically a configuration. I really don't give you any tutorials or any information. I just get in, and I could change it. You know, I don't think I will, but I could. I usually just look for a difficult Linux configuration problem. Okay. And so at the end of the semester, you can work in groups, but you need to configure and show that your system works. And it's something that's going to require a lot of Linux commands and a lot of configuration and services and so on. It brings everything together. And then project B is usually just a research type of project where I ask you guys to, you know, configure a service. So for instance, if we don't get a chance, there's a lot of services, right, in the server. So if we don't get a chance to do a lab on email servers, then that could be your project. You just do, in Linux, I'm gonna configure the email services, and then I'm gonna demo, hey, you know, I can send emails and so on. So again, you know, the goal of this class is for you to learn the basic fundamental concepts of Linux and Unix, to become comfortable with, you know, the command line and commands and configuration. And then from there, now you should be able to deploy any kind of service, right? That's the general goal. And also to do automation of things. Okay, so that's your projects, 10% of your total grade. So that's 50%. And then as you can see, labs and homework, which is really the same thing, is the other half. So 50% of your grade is labs, okay? So make sure you do your lab assignments, because as I said, that's a sure way. Look at how many points that is. Okay, all right, so go ahead and read the course policies, attendance, all of that. The most important thing I would say is please do not email me homework assignments. Please, you know, my inbox gets really full, especially now that courses are online. And so I do not recommend that you submit any homework assignments via email. You should use Brightspace. Okay, so they should say Brightspace. But you must submit everything through Brightspace. As I said, if you want more time, just bring it up during class, you know, and you know that I'd rather do that and give an extension than to. I don't recommend submitting homework via email. All right, so read through the rest. You know, here's the emergency information. You know, I'm sure there's some COVID-related information, but we will not have any need to go to the lab. You know, we basically just use we just need Linux, right? And so we just need any Linux VM should do. All right, here is the course topics. This is subject to change, but usually, you know, I don't change it. So intro to system administration, intro to Unix, that's what I'll cover this week. Linux workstations and scripting. I'll get into, as I said, even though some of you may have taken Python, I will give a very brief introduction to Python, However, as I said, I already pointed out, you can check out my course 140. You know, look up individual topics in there and watch the videos if you'd like. Then we'll get into data centers, Linux services, and some network tools. We'll look at Wireshark. Usually I have a series of Wireshark readings this semester. And so basically I'll give you you do the reading, and then you're supposed to follow along with Wireshark. And then you will submit basically a one-page summary of what you did, okay? So there's a lot of homework, and what I will usually do is for even 1 week, you know, let's say maybe not this week, but let's say week 3, you're gonna have to, you know, maybe three homework assignments. So I'll create for each one a link, all right? And just because one might be the reading assignment, one might be the specific lab, and then one might be, usually I like to give little problems, right? So I do that a lot. So instead of giving you a quiz per se that you have to solve during the day, what I might do is I'll give you a little problem, you know, in grep and awk or cron or something, and then you just solve it for the next time. All right, so I usually do that sometimes. Then week 4, we'll get into task scheduling in cron. Cron is a feature, a facility in Linux that allows you to schedule tasks. Like saying, for instance, I want to back up my files every Monday at 3 a.m., right? So you can schedule that in cron, run a script from cron, and do all of that. So we'll get into how cron works, the syntax of cron entries, and but we'll also combine it with scripting. Automation, if you read your book, especially the Limoncelli book, you'll see that one big focus of that book is automation. So we'll cover that topic: backups, services and DNS, help desk, customer care. Customer care is one of those topics that is just slides that we have to read through. There's nothing technical about them. We'll get into DNS and fixing things. Then that brings us to exam 1. Then namespaces and user account management, centralization, decentralization, network debugging. We'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll just, Linux clusters and parallel approaches. So that's when we start to take several Linux computers and basically network them together, right? So we network the computers together so that we can achieve, parallel computing, services or things like that. I'll throw in there, whole bunch of services at some point: FTP, HTTP, and commands like tar, geolocation. So sometimes we'll just do some of these are just simple exercises that we can do. For the most part, it'll be configuring it in Linux and then automating some tasks. You could do it manually, but it's probably better to automate it. Then, as I said, the file system and file system analysis, grep and awk at some point. I thought I don't know why I have this so late in the semester. I actually think I do this earlier than this. SNMP, which is basically it's an idea of network management. You'll see that I think it's a very interesting remote monitoring, basically, and the network operations center. So these labs are very interesting. Web services, and then a few final managerial things. Okay, and library. So that's the tentative course schedule, which is subject to change. And this does not by any means cover all the topics. So there's many other topics in Linux. And that's one reason why I would recommend getting this book. Okay, if you're looking at this book that I just highlighted, that would definitely be one reason why I would recommend the book. It's just impossible to cover all those topics. That book is really thick. I mean, it's one of those very thin page, very heavy, dense books, but it's a really great book. So I'm basically following that book. So really, I would recommend that, buy the book, and then you can cover the rest of the topics on your own. you know, once you finish the course. So you can always stay up to date and basically just get a full comprehensive view of all the topics in Linux. But I have, as I said, I've taken out a lot of material from these 3 books. All right, so that's the syllabus. Are there any questions before we get started?
I don't think I have any.
No?
I don't have any.
Okay, so doesn't sound like anyone has any questions. Nothing in the chat. Okay, so like I said, I still need to update some things with the with the VMs. I will probably add those links to the website, my course website. So somewhere on here, right? Ooh, I'm in the wrong. So somewhere on here, around here, you can expect that I will post a few more links. Oh, actually, they're here. Oh, here they are. Oh, okay. So here is the seed Ubuntu VM. You can see that there if you want to download it. And here's another Ubuntu 16.04 VM. Okay. And I will ask Mitch to probably create another VM to be available for you guys. If you look at the seed Ubuntu, which is something that we can use, they have not at this time updated to like 18.04. So we'll need that one for some of the labs, but for others we could possibly use 18.04. All right. Okay, so that's basically it. So let's go ahead now and get back to Brightspace and just now we can officially get started with the course. So let's go to content. You can see here, your table of contents. All right. So now that the first module then would be intro, which is this one. All right. So let's talk a little bit about labs, which is what, so for this week, basically, you are responsible for the material in this module. Next week, you will be responsible for the material in this module and so on, right? So, they're usually, although they're here by topic, each module takes about a week to complete, usually, at least for me to do the lecture and then assign the lab. And then I usually give you 1 week to complete the lab assignment. So
I think your vid froze, Professor.
Sorry?
I think your video froze because for us, all we see is the administrative and management. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, sorry, I sometimes forget to share the other screen. So just let me know if I do that. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so what I was saying is you need to go to content, right? This is where we are in Brightspace. Then you can see the modules. Each one of these rectangles is a module, and they're usually about a week. So the first one after admin and resources is this one, intro. So intro is the module for this week, okay? So what I was saying is that, this week you're responsible for the contents of this one, next week you're responsible for this one, and so on. So today then, let's talk a little bit about what's in here. So you can see there's 3 files. This file, VM manual, take a quick look at it. It's only for the seed VM. It has to do with passwords and user accounts. That's really all you need from it. But you can read through it if you'd like. But otherwise, really, we just will look at these 2 things this week. Okay? So you can see lab week 1, intro to ITS 372. This will be the lab that is going to get assigned on Wednesday, right? Wednesday is your first lab, so we'll talk a little bit about it. And then these are just the slides for today. So obviously today I'm kind of just motivating what this class is about. And so I will just say, you know, what is system administration? What do system administrators do? So sometimes there's a lot of slides in these, so I'm not going to go over every single one. I'll just cover some selectively. But let's start with the lab. So I'm just going to click on that page, and you can see that here, right? So so usually I just create these Word documents, and then basically, you know, you must answer the question. So what I'm always looking for in a lab is evidence that you have done the task, right? So that means that I want to see I need to see screenshots, okay? So, you know, you start up your VM, you start up your Linux machine, and then you will type some commands, and then you get some output, right? So I'll do that. Today I'm not going to use the VM or run Linux commands, but I'll do that on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we'll boot up the VM, and just, you know, type a command here and there, and then just kind of explain, give you a feel for how things work, okay? What I would recommend is between today and Wednesday, your homework assignment, if you want to call it that, is that you need to get, if you haven't done so already, get VMware installed, you know, get the license and everything. Then, you know, you don't have to pay for it. The school provides a license. You just have to get go to the place, the appropriate place. And I think I haven't added it to the website for this one, but if I go to here, I think I have that. In here, if I go to this one, yeah, get VMware, right? You can see that, or somebody just shared it in the chat, so you can do that as well. Click on that link, right? But here I provided software licenses for VMware, so you can click on that, and that should give you the VMware. So that's really all I want you to do for your homework this next.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
So I downloaded the seed Ubuntu thing, and I uploaded it to VMware, and it didn't work for me there. It only works in VirtualBox. Is that okay?
Okay, so it should work. I think it's you haven't what you download from what you downloaded from the website is a VM that still needs something. You know, you still need to create it. You basically download some files, and then you need to follow some steps in VMware to create it.
Yeah, I tried doing that, and for some reason, like, it wasn't recognizing the files, so I just used VirtualBox, and it comes up for me completely fine through VirtualBox. Is that okay if I use that, or do I have to use VMware?
You don't have to. You can try to do all labs the way that you're describing. However, I would recommend that you create it. And there's a video also in the channel. Then you just go to the channel, you know, go to the link, and you can find it there. And I think it's called something like How to Create a VM. Okay, so you can just reference that video. Okay.
Okay, I'll try it that way. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a video. This question comes up a lot, so we just have a video for that as well. So
Okay.
how to download this? I think it's called How to Create the CVM. So look for it, and hopefully once you follow all those steps in the video, you will be able to run it in VMware.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so that would be, unfortunately, I have these in like all these different courses. I think in the 350. Oh, here. So if you're seeing this, there's the link. So video on how to create the CVM using VMware. Okay, so you can just look at that video, take you to YouTube, and then you can just follow all the steps there. All right, so let me switch back to Brightspace. All right. So what I was saying is so for Wednesday, have your VM ready to go. Also download that 1604 VM if you can, and just be aware I'll probably ask Mitch to create another one. And then just use them interchangeably. At some point, you'll figure out which one you want to use, and I'm sure you'll just stay with that one. So this is what the first labs, some of the labs will look like. They're basically just Linux exploration labs. So I'll do a lecture that week about the specific topic, what is cron, this is how it works and everything. And then you'll have a series of Linux commands that you have to run, right? So usually these are some of the most basic commands, okay? And then as you can see, you'll just run them. And then as far as what you submit, what I would recommend is start with these documents as your homework. Start with these documents as your homework, and then just put in the screenshots. And then usually I'm looking for like 2-3 sentences on, to answer the question. So what is nano? Nano is this. What is sudo? Sudo is this. Okay, and that's basically it. So as you can see, the first lab this week is very easy. And then there's, I'm gonna really quickly just jump into like scripting. So I'll do a brief introduction of this as well on Wednesday. But I'll discuss what these things are, kind of give you a high-level explanation. All right, and that's really it. I mean, a lot of these labs are kind of like that. They're just some commands, what they're for, and how to use it. Okay. All right, so that's the lab. As you can see, the document is already posted. So, but we'll come back to it. I just really wanted to do that, kind of give you a brief intro to that, and in particular to remind you to have your VMs ready to go. For that lab, the CVM is fine, as it's a pretty simple introductory lab. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, what we'll be doing on Wednesday, let's talk a little bit about the rest of today, just what we're going to be doing today. So today I'm just going to go over these slides. So I think I need to download. Okay. Yeah, so let me just download these slides. All right. And then I'm going to share the slides. All right, here we go. So, this actually ties in almost directly to the book, the Limoncelli book. So as I said, you don't really have to buy that book because a lot of that content is on these slides. So for the rest of today, all we're going to do is we're going to go over kind of the motivation of what do system administrators do, or what, in essence, what is system administration and management as it relates in particular to the Unix operating system. Also, let me skip ahead. All right. Do you guys know who these two people are? Do you let me put it another way. Do you recognize their names?
Heard of Ken Thompson before.
Huh?
Heard of Thompson before.
You heard of Thompson?
Are they the founders of Unix?
They are. Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. And we all know who Steve Jobs is, right? Bill Gates, right? We all know those names. It's a shame that we don't know these names because they really were the pioneers that allowed, all the other things to be possible. Yes, exactly. They create Bell Labs. They created C, right? And then using that, or C was created at Bell Labs and then used to create the Unix operating system, which is, has been the foundation for a lot of things that follow. So they're very important people, right? Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. And, I just wanted to kind of honor them, right? Because the whole class is about something that they created. As someone said at Bell Labs. All right, so anyway, that's the system that we are going to be using. So now let's go back to the beginning. All right, so what is system administration? I already talked about that. Okay, so what do system administrators do? Okay, and so really, what I'm gonna ask you guys to do is to read these on your own at home, right? Read through every single bullet and, kind of have an understanding. I will really just go over like the main topic. So the different things that system administrators do. So kind of motivate. As you can see, that's why this course, as I said, is not really a depth course. Because we jump from one topic to another topic every week, right? It's more of but at the same time, the common theme is that these are all they're usually services or tasks that you can perform in Unix with the goal of, providing some service, providing services that users need, dealing with the headache of, as you guys know, software breaks, software has dependencies, software has multiple versions, right? So sometimes you're doing something and for that task you need version 2.5, and then for the next task you need 3.5. And so we're gonna look at tools like Conda and Anaconda, which are, we'll explore those as well, how to set them up for dealing with certain versions of software, right? But anyway, so all those things are the tasks that fall within the scope of system administrators. And so I'll just go over these. And as I said, I recommend that you read through these because although these are not very technical sometimes, they will be questions that could appear on the exams. So the first thing that system administrators might do is they might build a site or a system from scratch. As hopefully you guys, I always recommend this to students if you haven't done this already, is build a computer, right? Build a computer. I know that obviously computers are expensive and most of you have laptops and everything, but if you ever have the chance to build a computer, maybe like your gaming computer or something where you buy the parts, certainly, do that. Build a computer, install Linux on it, get everything configured, deal with the monitor, everything, it's always a really good exercise to go through. So if you haven't done it already, certainly, or maybe find like an old computer at home and that, obviously something that doesn't belong to, your family, but something that you can have access to, explore how it works, rebuild it and configure the software. So it's always a really good thing to do. So anyway, but buildings, system administrators might not just build one computer from scratch, spec a computer and then put it together. They might, excuse me, they might actually build an entire site from scratch, right? So, they have to think about the organizational structure, business priorities, the namespaces, right? So assigning IP addresses, names to the computers. If you're going to build something that's closer to a data center, right, you have to think about power, cooling, the network design, and then having all these, once you have the infrastructure, oh, great, but then get the operating system on it. Linux is free, as you know, so it's very powerful and secure. And then enable the services. And then you have the issue of, installing additional software in the future. That, which might mean having a repository of programs, and updates, which you know are critical, and then all the other things, right? Establish initial core application services, right? Like authentication and authorization. So for instance, although in this class, we're not going to cover Active Directory, but it's the thing that you know for Windows systems. For Linux, you might have some kind of a, some type of an authentication and authorization as well. The lifecycle management, and then other services like email, file services, backups, network configuration, printing, remote access, etc. Right? So all these services that you might imagine, you know, file, and you know, and you can see I didn't even include all of them, like file management, shared drives, etc. All of that are things that you would have to, that a system administrator might need to build from scratch. So building a site from scratch, right? And knowing all these tools. Okay, so that's one of the tasks that a system administrator might need to do. Growing a small site, you know, now growing it means, okay, you have customer, you have people that use your equipment, so you probably want to have a help desk, right? A help desk, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the semester, just some general best practices that are recommended in your book. Training new hires, new equipment, having a network operations center. You know, how could you have a center where you have a way of monitoring a lot of computers in your network all at once? Is that even possible? Well, as we will see, it is very much possible. And when we look at the SNMP types of protocols, we will see how that can be done. Keep in mind, a lot of companies actually try to sell that as a product, so it's not always very clear, like on Windows, for instance, that's sometimes disabled. At least in the past it was. And so ways of monitoring multiple computers are maybe a task of a system administrator, you know, something that they do. And so we'll explore a little bit of that as well. You know, getting statistics of how of the work needs, work utilization. Again, that falls within monitoring. And so, you know, writing reports, you know, could be useful. So that's another task they might do. Monitoring services for capacity and availability, so you can predict when to scale them, and so on, right? So many different kinds of things that they do. Dealing with, you know, you can read through this, but dealing with, you know, if you have a global, right? So how do you keep track of the time systems? You know, having a help desk that works 24/7, things like that. Dealing with replacing services, right? So, you know, what are the best practices to, you know, let's say that you have to update something, or you want to get a better service. You know, what breaks? Are any dependencies going to break? A dependency is basically that you have a piece of software that is running on an operating system, and that piece of software might need other pieces of software to work. And if one of those breaks, the whole thing will break. That used to be one of the most difficult things in Linux, okay? Like whenever you wanted to install something, you had to manually install all the dependencies, and that was tough. Nowadays, in your generation, for your time at least, that's a lot easier. I mean, way much easier. Because we have now things like apt-get, you know, or we have things like Anaconda, different tools, and they all basically take care of all the dependencies for you whenever you want to install something. Unless, not always, I mean, there's always a situation where you're installing something very experimental or new, and then you can expect to have problems. You know, moving a data center, relocating, you know, as you might imagine, that involves the technical aspect, but also like managing people, you know, and schedules and things like that. Same thing here, you know, dealing with buildings, assessing a site, right? So due diligence. So going into a site, looking at their practices, making recommendations. You know, for instance, assessing a site, the first thing you probably want to look at is the ticket system, right? So as we will see later on, one of the recommendations of having an IT practice is that you want to have a ticketing system. You don't just want people calling or emailing randomly, and you know that's a very disorganized way of doing things, right? So these are some of the tasks of a system administrator. Dealing, you know, more complex things like dealing with mergers and acquisitions. Imagine if you have two companies that merge, like let's say, you know, JP Morgan Chase, right? They used to be two banks and now they merge, and they had two IT practices with some redundancy. And what they probably want to do is they probably want to find redundancies to eliminate them so that they can save costs. But that will translate into a more complex IT group. And so think about that, right? So dealing with all those different services. Coping with frequent machine crashes or major outages, right? So, you know, how do you know, a little bit of disaster recovery, like if the power goes out, what do they do? Having a backup sites, generators. And what if the machines are crashing all the time, you know, dealing with figuring out why a computer is down, etc. So managing downtime, basically. And a very important metric in IT is actually the uptime, right? The uptime is something where, you know, you're always measuring, you know, like when you look at cloud services, right? You don't just look at processing power and storage, but you also look, what is their uptime? You know, how often are they down? Because when they're down, you're down. And so these are just, you know, different tasks. Okay. And as I said, I'm not going through every single bullet, but I do recommend that you guys take a look at it. I really just want to kind of lay out, you know, some of the things that system administrators do. And then as you might imagine, within these, you know, some of the topics have been picked so that we can go into more depth about them, either through the slides or through a lab or both. You know, what tools system administrators, this talks about the tools that a system administrator should have. I always kind of like this slide, so I'll take a second here. So obviously a system administrator needs to know computers, right? Has a laptop of some kind for diagnostics. That means having some kind of a sniffer like Wireshark. That's why in this course, you have several reading assignments related to Wireshark. You need to have some kind of an encrypted remote accessing tool like SSH, basically. So, you know, we'll look at that. Safe FTP, which is, you know, a way of transferring files. And then, you know, ways of connecting to wired and wireless computers. Sometimes having a terminal emulator, you know, so like if you're patching into servers or appliances, network appliances, having a spare PC for experimentation, tools like screwdrivers, right? So there is a set of tools that you usually need for computers in particular, because some of those screws are very tiny. Okay. Extra cables, digital camera, USBs, your reference books like the one I mentioned today for Linux, headache medicines, right? So one thing, this headache medicines, I actually think is very true in the sense that system administration, a lot of the time, and I'm sure you guys know, is about troubleshooting, right? Troubleshooting hardware, but more often than not, troubleshooting software, right? Or as you will call it, you know, like firmware or even services. Okay, so you know, you're going to have a lot. It's really, you know, this class is not a coding class. You know, we don't have any compiled code. You know, when I say software, I don't mean that. We have scripting, but the scripting is extremely trivial. It's basically a library, some of the basic constructs of programming, like an if statement or a for loop, and then basically just using ways of interacting with the commands in the command line. But it's really about troubleshooting the installation of services, of software, right? So you're going to be installing a lot of programs this semester. So you always have to do, you know, apt-get install, sudo apt-get install, and you want to understand what those things are. And then sometimes you configure things and they don't work. And the very first lab that will be about that, I think, where you have to, the first lab where you actually install a complex service will be the DNS Lab. So the first 2-3 weeks, it'll just be very easy, standalone type of commands, where, you know, I type this command and there you go, I got some output. But once you get into more complex things like DNS, you're configuring a service, it's not going to be not a standalone commands, it'll be a series of commands, right? That have to work in order, a certain logic. And so at that point, you know, it starts to get into this whole installation, configuration, troubleshooting, debugging, okay? And so really, sysadmin, a lot of the time, is it's very focused on problem solving. So having an understanding of your operating system, having an operation of the services, and just having the intuitions on how things work. Right, so this is really an important slide because a lot of the focus of the course is that, right? Doing, you know, problem solving, basically, you know, which is what you love. You know, you're an IT student, so you have an interest in that. All right, so what else do system administrators do? So they document systems, policies, and procedures, right? So they want to describe the why and the how. They want to record it, so they want to have some kind of a knowledge management tool, maybe some kind of a wiki that they have within the company. They have manuals, obviously. Although nowadays everything is online, maybe even the ticketing system. A good approach is whenever you have a ticket, a problem, and you solved it, is to actually put in the problem and the solution in that ticket itself, because that way, what can happen with a ticketing system going forward is whenever someone else gets a problem similar to that, they can always look it up. All right, have we ever gotten a problem in this area? Find the relevant tickets and then reference the solutions to those problems. And so that way, although it might seem like a lot of work at first, it saves you a lot of time in the future to kind of keep track of that. Scripts also do the same because the script actually contains all the steps to the solution. But anyway, documentation is really important for that, for knowledge management, also for, you know, auditors, like if they're going to audit your practice, just because of law, the law might require you compliance, especially if you're dealing with like HIPAA for healthcare or Sarbanes-Oxley for financial institutions, etc. These are very, very important. There are certain laws in place that require you to have documentation of systems, policies, and procedures. Are there any questions at this time, guys?
No, I don't think so.
No questions, right? Yeah, like I said, it's pretty straightforward, very straightforward. You know, we're just going over what the system administrators do, kind of motivate the course. Identify the fundamental problems in the environment, certainly, right? Figure out, you know, you have the help desk, but, you know, you just problem solving. There's financial aspects as well, you know, that have to do if you have like more of a senior manager type of a position as in the system administration practice, like dealing with money for projects, getting projects done, budgets, you know, all that, obviously communication, managing personnel, which as you might imagine, is a lot of work. There's this one. This is important, right? So system administration is a customer focused practice. If you think about it, although most of the work that you're doing is technical, you're not just configuring those systems so that they're there functioning, right? They're there because they provide services that people will use to do their work, like configuring the email server or using some kind of data science tool, et cetera. Whatever it is, the payroll system, whatever it is, you're there to provide that service for someone else so that they can do their work, or for customers to buy the products that you sell, and so, or services. So basically that means keeping your customers and management happy, right? So TLC, you know, that whole tender love and care, making good impression, communicating really well. You know, for one example of this, I'm sure you've noticed, is whenever the university, for instance, has anything going on with the IT system, an email goes out letting you know that it's going to happen, and then an email goes out whenever they've resolved it. This is just standard practice. I mean, it's like it's a textbook approach, right? Because the idea is to keep everyone happy, you keep them informed, and so on. Creating a system status website, listening to complaints, understand management priorities, all these things are also within the focus of a system administrator. Okay? Keeping systems from being too slow, you know, finding bottlenecks. So a lot of it is monitoring and analyzing, right? And you've covered this, I'm sure, in your networking courses, so you know what those things are. Dealing with computers whenever they come, users, managing users, turnover, right? So people leave, so you want to preserve all that, you know, that Linux guru that you had, or that, you know, VPN guru, whatever it is, right? So, you know, they leave and then you lost all that knowledge. So that's why documenting a lot of that knowledge is useful. Management aspects, obviously, you can read through these here, dealing with employees. System reliability, figuring out some metrics and then monitoring, right? You know, so monitoring uptimes, for instance, and then figuring out ways to improve your system. So a little bit of optimization there, and and keeping redundancy of the system, reliability, sorry. Decreasing costs, that's certainly one, and we are all aware of these, right? Decreasing costs is obviously the main driver of IT services. IT services exist for a company to make money, not the other way around, right? So they're not there to take money away. They need to be justified. So trends within this are centralization of some services, as you know, which includes even moving to the cloud, maintenance contracts, dealing with maintenance, reducing the running costs, outsourcing. Nowadays, there's a lot of talk about like AI, right? How AI is going to, it can replace people. And it is true. I mean, if you look at the 50s and the 60s and well into the 70s, people had a lot of support staff, right? A lot of support staff in organizations. This is before computers. Before the computers, people had a lot of, companies had a lot of people, you know, working typewriters and working, you know, tabulating, you know, drafters, engineers, just crunching numbers, right? And then computers came along and they replaced a lot of those people. So now, you know, although we have computers, we'll have AI-driven computers, smarter computers, which basically is really just saying automation. And automation can replace people. So if you think of this, like if you had no automation and then you could have one person just entering new users, new employees into the database all day, right? Like data entry. But one of the goals of this class is to show you guys to think in terms of automating all those processes with scripting, for instance. And that's why a lot of the labs have like the Linux component of just typing the commands in the terminal, but also the scripting component of how can I automate this as much as possible so that I don't have to manually do this repetitively 50 times. I can just automate it. And you can see how that then, you know, relates to decreasing the cost. So if you think about it, I would argue that this idea of automation, you know, determine whether you can reduce the support burden through standards and automation. It's not just something that it's a nice thing, but it's actually necessary. Because if you can't do this, the organization will find other ways of doing it because it wants to decrease costs. All right, so it's, you certainly want to be in the knowledge, right, of how to do the scripting, understanding how to automate, not necessarily the AI, although even that, I would recommend that you get into that. We do have a minor in applied data science in this program, so you should look into it. All right, but anyway, really here it just has to do with automation and knowledge management and so on, right? So decreasing costs, adding features, adding, you know, obviously services need to change. You know, for instance, you know, we wanted to have, you know, especially now, let's think of the pandemic, right? The pandemic has made everyone rethink everything. We have to work from home, so we need even more of a digital technologies. You know, you guys use your virtual machines. You might actually want to use like cloud services, right? So these things are all changing, right? So we need to have all this evolving. It's constantly evolving. Zoom, right? So, you know, many of us didn't know about Zoom a year ago, right? And now, you know, it's become so important. Or I know you guys use Discourse, I believe, or something like that. And so you have all these tools, right? And it's constantly evolving. So you're adding new features. So system administrators, in a sense, need to be aware of everything out there because things are evolving so quickly. The great thing about Linux, though, I will say, is that you saw the picture, Dennis, Ritchie, and Thompson. Linux was, or Unix was designed years ago. I want to say 60s, 70s, somewhere around there. And those basic principles are still around today. It's impressive, right? In fact, Linux, if anything, I would argue that, as you guys know, Mac is based on Linux. It's a Linux kernel. And even Windows nowadays, I feel like, although they, you know, they've dominated for many years, they've taken a lot of the good things from Unix and tried to make it part of their own systems. Okay, and so it's definitely something that has been around for a long time, and I foresee that probably, you know, it'll be around for the rest of your careers, I would imagine. So it's certainly something that is extremely powerful, and it just gets more powerful, and it's free. So, and secure, right? You guys know that the security of Linux lies in the fact that it's open source, right? That people can look at the code, modify it, improve it, and they're constantly, you know, patching it, if you will, fixing it, so that the security is not in the fact that it's like a mystery, but the opposite of that. The security is in the fact that people have tried to break it, right, and study it. But anyway, that's what system administrators do, right? They look at upgrading services, building confidence, you know, making sure that everything looks good, supporting your staff, of course. So these are some managerial things, setting priorities, how to, what are the basic services that you want to have? Email, printing, remote access, security, obviously, authentication, automation of a lot of things that I already described why that's so important. Budgets, right? So the more you automate, if you can automate a task, data entry as much as possible, maybe you needed 2 data entry specialists, now you only need 1, right? And that's you have to have this knowledge, because you don't want to be, who do you want to be? The data entry specialist or the person that can automate the services? What do
So
you
you
guys
can
think?
automate it.
Right. You don't want to be that entry specialist because they're going to automate you. So you want to be the person that can automate, right? And so you have to be kind of in that knowledge before you get replaced by a Python script. So, that's important. And so on. Okay. All right. So we have a few minutes, so let's keep going. Yeah, so you can read through some of these. There's management issues here, budgets, communications. Some of this is repetitive, and yeah. So now this gets into, kind of got too excited and showed this slide at the beginning. But what system will we use? The Unix operating system. Remember that Unix is really the general operating system, and then there's Linux, which is Linus Torvalds, a guy from Finland, something, can't remember his name exactly, Linus, but he created Linux, and it's basically, but it's based on Unix, which is the work of Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. I want to say, I have a book here. I can't remember. I think one of them also wrote C, but I might be wrong. Oh no, here it is. The C programming language, Dennis Ritchie. Yeah, so Dennis Ritchie, I believe, created C, or is one of the creators of C. C is, of course, you guys know, the C programming language from which came C, C++, and then Thompson, I think, was the driving force, but with Dennis Ritchie, of Unix. Certainly look up their history. I mean, spend some time. I want to say they've been awarded like lifetime achievement awards and things like that, because their contribution is very big. Although we don't see it, we see the recognition of like Steve Jobs, and I have a Mac, right? But the operating system that's running on this computer is based on Unix. So they really did some of the very, very important work in the beginning. So very interesting. All right, so I think that's, yeah, the next chapter is chapter 2. So we can cover that one on, just really briefly on Wednesday. It's gonna be, getting, climbing out of the hole, getting out of the problems, basically. So we'll talk about that. So as I said, the course will be a lot like this. Usually, I don't really break. Sometimes I'll do lecture and lab every time, so it doesn't get boring. Reminders for Wednesday, make sure you have your VMware installed. I already showed you a link for that. Set up your VM. You can download either the CVM or the other VM. Have that ready to go. My plan will be kind of go over these slides, chapter 2, and then we'll get into the lab, get into the VMware, get into the VM, get into the terminal, run a few commands, and then after that, you guys can work on your lab and ask any questions that you might have. And that's it. All right, so that's it for today. So I'll stay for all right, there's a question in the chat. Yeah, Linus Torvald, somebody wrote. Great, thank you. All right, so I'll stay for a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we can stop here for today, and I will see you guys on Wednesday.